All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a pretty startling situation involving the U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. You probably know them as CISA. Now, normally, they're the tip of the spear defending the nation's critical infrastructure and government networks from cyber threats. But today, we aren't looking at an external attack. We're looking at a massive vulnerability left wide open right inside their own walls, and what that actually tells us about the current state of the agency. In fact, we're skipping the usual background because I want you to hear this immediate assessment from the security researcher who actually uncovered the whole thing. Guillaume Valadon from the security firm GitGuardian flat out said, "This is indeed the worst leak that I've witnessed in my career." I mean, that is a massive statement. GitGuardian literally scans public code repos for exposed secrets all day long. And when Valadon found this, the information exposed was so highly sensitive and the security practices so incredibly bad, he admitted he honestly thought it had to be a fake honeypot before digging deeper. So let's get right into the anatomy of this exposure. Believe it or not, this wasn't some highly sophisticated nation-state hack. It came down to a single contractor working for a firm called Nightwing. They were basically treating a public GitHub repo, which incredibly they named Private CISA, as a personal scratchpad to sync files. And what was inside? Literally the master keys to the kingdom. We're talking AWS GovCloud admin keys, plaintext passwords for dozens of internal systems, and access to LZDSO, which is the agency's secure code development environment. And maybe the absolute worst part? It exposed credentials to CISA's internal code Artifactory. Now, you know that normally a dev environment handling this caliber of government data is locked down tight, encrypted, completely private, restricted access, the whole 9 yards. But here, the data was just sitting there in plain text on a public repo. And it actually gets worse. The commit logs show the contractor explicitly disabled GitHub's default security feature, the one specifically designed to block you from publishing secrets. So actually scratch that. It wasn't just an accidental oversight. It was a conscious decision to bypass the very safety net built to prevent this exact scenario. To really grasp how bad this is, security expert Philippe Cajrelli tested those AWS keys and found out, yep, they were still totally valid. As he points out, if an attacker gets a foothold inside that code artifactory, they aren't just taking data. They're basically poisoning the well. They could quietly slip a backdoor into a software package. Then, every single time CISA builds and deploys something new, they would unknowingly distribute that attacker's backdoor left and right across government networks. It is quite literally the ultimate supply chain nightmare. Which brings us to a bigger issue, a seriously depleted cyber agency. To understand how an error of this magnitude just slipped right through the cracks, we have to look at the macro environment over at CISA. 1/3. That's a staggering fraction. CISA has lost 1/3 of its workforce since January 2025. This is due to a mix of early retirements, buyouts, and resignations during ongoing government downsizing. When you have that kind of massive brain drain, the institutional knowledge and the internal oversight teams, the exact people who normally monitor contractor hygiene and enforce those strict security protocols, they are just stretched to an absolute breaking point. And the reality of these cuts is hitting the ground level incredibly hard right now. At a recent town hall meeting, CISA leadership was pretty frank with the staff about the rough road ahead. Nick Anderson, the executive assistant director, flat out told his team, "There are some people in this room in programs we are going to turn off." Staff were explicitly warned they're going to have to do a lot more work with a lot less people, especially with severe budget cuts and an impending government shutdown. They're practically being forced into triage mode. And this is happening right in the middle of shifting defense priorities. Because despite losing all these people, CISA's actual mission is being radically redirected. The administration is forcing a major pivot toward defending operational technology, or OT. Now, if you're not familiar, this isn't just about protecting data on servers anymore. We're talking about securing the actual hardware and software that run our physical world. Things like water treatment facilities, power grids, and manufacturing plants. They need to protect these against increasingly brazen attacks from nation-state hackers. And the stakes here, they literally could not be higher. Leadership actually warned staff that they have to prepare for a Katrina-like event with a cyber nexus. Just imagine that for a second. A cyber incident that leaves a major city without drinking water or electricity for days or even weeks. But securing physical infrastructure like that is going to be a huge lift. Finding and recruiting the highly specialized technical talent you need to defend operational technology is heavily hindered by those workforce reductions we just talked about, not to mention the hit to their reputation from incidents exactly like this one.
Naturally, all of this leads right to the congressional fallout.
When you actually map out the timeline of this incident, it's pretty troubling. Get this. That private CISA repository was created all the way back in November 2025. It just sat there, exposing high-level credentials publicly for roughly 6 months before GitGuardian found it from the outside. Sure, the GitHub account was eventually taken offline, but the biggest red flag? After CISA was officially notified in mid-May, there was an inexplicable 48-hour delay in revoking those valid AWS GovCloud keys. They just remained active for 2 full days after the alarm was tripped. Because of this wild timeline, Congress has now set a hard deadline of June 5th for CISA to provide a full, detailed explanation. U.S. Senator Maggie Hassan stepped right in, sending a formal letter demanding a classified briefing from Acting Director Nick Anderson. She fired off 12 very specific questions about the agency's internal policies, stating clearly that this whole incident raises serious questions about how such a security lapse could occur at the very agency charged with helping to prevent cyber breaches. She's actively pressing them on whether the recent turmoil and workforce cuts have degraded the agency's ability to protect even its own internal assets. Now, in their official response to the ongoing investigation, a CISA spokesperson stated impartially, "Currently, there is no indication that any sensitive data was compromised. We are working to ensure additional safeguards are implemented." They made a point to emphasize that they hold their team members to the highest standards of integrity and operational awareness. So, for now, the investigation is still actively trying to determine if any threat actors actually found and used those exposed keys before they finally got revoked. So, as we wrap up this explainer, it really leaves us with one critical, forward-looking question. Can a depleted agency effectively secure a nation's infrastructure? We've got our premier cyber defense agency tasked with this massive pivot to defend physical power plants and water systems from nation-states, while simultaneously struggling just to manage basic contractor security hygiene internally, all amid a 30% workforce reduction. How this balances out moving forward is absolutely something we all need to be paying very close attention to. Thanks for joining me today, and keep learning.